if you knew before they failed that you had a problem with the brakes on your Class 8 trucks? Well, Hendrickson may have a solution that will interest you. Hi, everybody. I'm Jack Roberts. Welcome to another edition of Heavy Duty Trucking Talks Trucking. Today, we're talking with Jeff Moris. He's the director, axle, brake, and wheel end systems, brake and wheel end group at Hendrickson. My old job, as Bill Maher always says on Real Time at Night. How you doing today, Jeff?
Pretty good, Jack. How are you?
I'm doing real well. Just to give the audience a little background here, we flew out to visit Hendrickson along with some other journalists about a month ago, and you were giving a technology briefing to all of us, and you mentioned that Hendrickson was doing some very intensive work on a telematics system, a sensor system for heavy-duty brake systems. I was fascinated by that. And so talk a little bit about why Hendrickson is pursuing this technology. Why do you feel there's a need out there in the heavy-duty space for some real-time brake information for fleets today?
Yeah, right. That's a great question. Brakes are one of the maintenance items that fleets have to deal with, whether they like it or not. If you've got technology that can help fleets understand when they need to do maintenance and catch issues before they turn into something that's a more expensive repair, they can really help their bottom line when they can plan their maintenance and not have unplanned downtime events and things like that. So giving them sensor technology that can monitor the wear or even look at operational conditions within the braking system can really help avoid some of those expensive and costly repairs.
Now, brake systems on heavy-duty trucks are incredibly complex, a lot of heat, a lot of vibration. There are different systems. So this has been one of the last frontiers for sensors on heavy-duty trucks, for telematic systems. It's really a rough place to ask these sensors and these electronic devices to work, isn't it?
It definitely is. When you talk about the environment that sensors have to work in around the braking system, obviously you've got heat. Brakes generate a lot of heat, so you need technologies and systems that can withstand that type of heat. You're underneath the chassis of the vehicle, so corrosion is always another concern. You have to make sure that the sensors can withstand the corrosion. And really, they get beat up. There's things that the axles encounter as you're going down the road that you got to have systems that are durable enough to withstand that environment on a commercial vehicle that can drive 100,000 miles a year. It's a lot of miles, a lot of things on the road that they can encounter. So they have to be robust and durable and provide reliable information and operation throughout their life.
And that's kind of a problem because brakes are so critical for safety on Class 8 vehicles. They are inspected thousands of times every day at roadside inspections, at weigh stations, other places all around the country. And it is one of the most common citations to put a heavy-duty vehicle out of service. And yet it is this area where fleets have little to no visibility in real time as to what's going on. So if you guys introduce a sensor system with real-time telematics, to me, this could be a game changer for fleets out there that are really focused on safety, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. And really our focus is mainly on trailers because that's what my group supports. And I think it's even more important on trailers because a lot of fleets have 2 or 3 times the number of trailers in their fleet than they do tractors. So that while they may see tractors on a regular basis, the trailers don't always get back to a shop where they can get inspected by qualified service personnel. So they may be out at a distribution center waiting to get loaded. They go from one center to the next and they get dropped off. And some of the driver pre-trip inspections may not be as effective as what they could be. So giving the fleet some visibility to those units while they're out in the field before they come back and giving them some idea of the health readiness of these trailers is something that could be really useful to make sure that the last thing you want to do is put a load on a trailer, especially like a refrigerated load, and then find out that you've got a brake repair that needs to happen before you can drive that trailer down the road. So having the ability to know, at any given time what the health readiness is of the vehicle is something that fleets would really be able to take advantage of.
So I know you don't want to give any proprietary secrets away. I'm sure some of your competitors will be watching to see what you guys are up to. But you do have some theories and some ideas as to how you think these technology will work. What can you share with us about what Hendrickson is working on now on this front?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of technology that exists on disc brake systems. I think the disc brakes primarily come out of Europe, where the vehicles have a lot more electronics and things integrated within them, and a lot of those are designed for European tractors and then moved into other applications. So there are wear sensors, whether they're just a sort of a wear out sensor, as one version that exists today. It's very commonly used in automotive. If you've ever done a brake job and you've got a little sensor that comes with your brake pads, that's essentially the same thing that is available in commercial vehicles today with air disc brakes. There are some more advanced systems that can continuously monitor the wear condition of the air disc brake, so you get a little bit more data when throughout the life of the pads, anyways. But what we're really focused on is how do you bring that technology to drum brakes? Because in the U.S., it's still about 80% of trailers, anyways, are spec'd with drum brakes. It's a small percentage that actually use disc brakes that have this technology. So having the ability to understand the health readiness, detect operational conditions, all of those things in a drum brake is really something that we feel there's a gap there, that we have technology. Hendrickson is one of the largest producers of brake systems in the world. We've got a very strong position in trailers, and we make a lot of these things. So we know how they work, and we know what happens when they don't work. We know how to detect when they're not working. So bringing some sensing technology to that product, I think, is going to be really valuable to the fleets.
Now, I know in both cases, obviously, there's some design differences between drum and disc, but I know that a lot of the focus is on the amount of friction material left on the pads. From an engineering and design perspective, are drums more difficult to deal with from a sensor and telematics perspective than disc brakes because of the more complex design, or is it just a matter of figuring out the best way to approach each system?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's more difficult. There are definitely different challenges between both. If you look at an air disc brake, it's all kind of one package, and all of the adjuster mechanism and all that stuff resides in one housing. So you have one place that you can install a sensor and get the information you need. When you look at drum brakes, there's a variety of different brands of slack adjusters and brake chambers and cams and lining material and all that stuff that you have to kind of work around to navigate what would a sensor look like that could be compatible with all of the variety of components that could be put together. So it adds a little bit of a challenge in terms of just the compatibility and where does the sensing element go and what can you get out of it. But I wouldn't say it's any more difficult. It's just a different design solution to put that on a drum brake.
But you have to track more systems on a drum brake, for example, than you do on a disc brake. Where with a disc, you can pretty much focus exclusively on the friction material. There's more to that with the drum, right?
There's more to it, but really, if you can sense the actuation position of the drum brake, you get an idea of what the linings, where the linings are at in their wear state. So through some mechanical sensors, you can get similar information out of a drum brake. They're basically doing the same thing. You've got a mechanism that actuates the linings against the rotor or the drum, and you've got an adjustment mechanism in there that follows the wear of the lining. So if you can, when you're talking about at least the lining sensor or wear sensor, you're just tracking how much of that adjustment has been used up, and whether that's happening on a S-cam shaft or within the internal mechanism of a disc brake. The technology is very similar. There's similar types of sensors. They just have to be packaged differently and attached differently to get that information.
So one of the bugaboos about telematics is, getting it, the information coming off the vehicles now is astounding. You could, how many times you pop the lock on the door if you wanted to, or roll the window up and down. One of the catches has been getting the information to the fleets in a timely, useful manner. I know you guys are still working on this. How do you envision a guy sitting in a computer, much like I'm sitting in front of this computer right here, suddenly he gets a notice that he's got a truck outside of Omaha, Nebraska, with some brakes on the trailer getting near a critical phase. How does Hendrickson envision that process?
Yeah, so a lot of that is still reliant upon the telematics providers. That's not an area that we directly, that we're developing anything from a telematics standpoint. We have the sensing solutions. We're developing the sensing solutions that can hand off that information to the telematics provider. So we are still reliant upon them to get the information off the vehicle to a telematics dashboard. In the case of wear, for instance, generally that's something that's happening slowly over time. So that in and of itself is something that if we can provide an alert that gives the fleet enough time to get the vehicle from wherever it's at back to sort of a preferred service shop where they can do planned maintenance, not unplanned maintenance, with the people that they know are qualified and cost effective to perform that job. That's our goal from a wear standpoint. If you want to talk about operational conditions where like if you have a dragging brake or something that's going to lead to an operational concern, obviously those types of things need to have a little bit more urgency with regard to getting the message out. And really they have a different audience. It's potentially not the right way to communicate that. If you have to send the information off the vehicle to some maintenance personnel that's looking for an urgent warning, and then they've got to get that back to the driver and have him do something before it turns into some, to more collateral damage or some catastrophic event. There's a lot of latency with that whole process. So the technology has been developing pretty rapidly over the last couple of years within the telematics workspace and with tractor to trailer connectivity that I think we're going to see some new developments that allow that, the operational conditions on a trailer be directly transmitted to the driver so that you don't have that latency and that concern with, did it actually get out to the people that need to view the error, and can it get back to the driver in time for him to do something? So we're working through all of that with the telematics guys and with companies that are integrating new methods and technologies for tractor to trailer connectivity to make sure that we get the information where it needs to go in a timely manner.
Sounds like it's a tiered system. There'd be certain levels of alerts based on the severity of the problem and how quickly it needed to be addressed.
Yep, that's right. Exactly.
Do you ever see a time where a guy can roll into a weigh station, inspection station, or get pulled over, hand him his phone and say, here's my brake, here's the health of my brake system based on the sensors on this vehicle in real time. You don't have to crawl under the truck. Do you think we'll ever get that sophisticated?
Potentially. I think we're a long ways off from that. As these technologies kind of evolve, it's something that we try to do is work with the enforcement community to make sure they understand, what they're getting out of this information or what they're getting out of these sensing systems and new technologies, and how can they simplify the process? How can they be more effective? Really, I think that the initial benefit is going to be more effective inspections for the fleets that are doing this stuff so they don't have findings in these roadside inspections. If the pre-trip inspections and normal scheduled inspections aren't as effective, and that's why they're getting these citations, at least you can provide the fleet with more advanced notice that they've got a problem, they can address it before the vehicle goes down the road. Eventually, maybe there are things that could be incorporated into some sort of log or something that could be transmitted to the enforcement agencies to help automate some of those inspections. But I think the technology needs to be proven so that it provides the same level of granularity and accuracy that the inspection community is looking for.
Yeah, it is complex. You need to get information to the driver. You need to get information to the fleet manager. Presumably, the OEM or the tier supplier would want to know sort of some engineering and operational history about the components. You might want to get it to law enforcement at some point. So there's a lot going on there. But again, the potential to keep vehicles in service, avoid downtime, payoffs to me sound like they'd be huge for the fleets.
Yeah, agreed. There's a number of ways that they can get a return on investment on this type of technology, whether it's reduced citations or more effective inspections, reduce time during those inspections, avoid the collateral damage. If you run your brake pads all the way down to the steel backing plates and destroy a rotor, that's a pretty expensive repair. It only takes a few of those to pay back this sensing technology on a vehicle. So,
What timeline you think we're looking at?
Timeline for development?
Deployment, development, yeah.
Some of the sensors exist today on disc brakes, obviously. I think, we're seeing a lot more requests for that type of technology on new trailers these days. So I think fleets are starting to
Really?
actually,
yeah,
they're asking about it. They're figuring out ways to get the information. I think that's really what has been a little bit of a holdup, is just waiting for the telematics technology to evolve to the point where they can get the information to the people that they can actually use it and get that payback. So that stuff is happening now. So fleets are more interested in these sensing technologies that can more readily integrate with the telematic systems that they've chosen, and so they're starting to look at these areas of investment and figure out where they can actually get a return. On the drum brake side, I think in the next couple of years you're going to see some new technologies hit the market that can really bring some value to that market as well. But yeah, I think within the next year or two, you're going to see some of those things come out.
If you're a fleet guy watching this, you're interested in this technology, can they reach out to you guys for some more information, to give you input? Are you interested in hearing from fleets with ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. We're always interested to hear what the fleets need. That's what drives our innovation. We want to make sure that we're producing, developing and launching products that people are going to be interested in. So any input that we can get from the fleets is always valuable.
So kind of a bonus question as we get ready to head out the door here. Are brakes the final frontier for sensors and technologies, or are there other systems you guys are looking at that you think there'll be some benefits further on down the line?
I don't know if I would say they're the final frontier. They're definitely on our roadmap in terms of systems that we feel there's value in putting some sensing technology on. We've been looking at tire pressure monitoring as well, and some of the other aspects, things that you can get out of automatic tire inflation systems and things like that. So I think there's a lot of interest in smart trailer technology today, and our focus is, we're not a sensor company. We're in the business of building hardware, suspensions primarily, and the things that attach to them. So if there are things that we can add to our products that make them more valuable to customers, that's what we're going to look at. So I think you'll see other things within the suspension area, at least coming from Hendrickson, that will help people integrate smart trailer technology and understand and better use our products.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Trailers, what was the saying, the longest distance in trucking is from the back of the cab to the front of the trailer on the technology front.
Yep.
It's been interesting that it seems in the past year, 2 years, that seems like finally trailers are starting to get some love finally on this front.
Yeah, I would say so. I've heard buzz about electronic control braking systems and things like that, which when you think about it, it's kind of crazy that we don't have technology on trailers like we do even in automotive, like backup cameras and things like that. There's been a huge hurdle to that. And to your point, it's been the connectivity between the tractor and the trailer. And as those things get figured out, I think it's going to enable a lot of other technologies to work well. And I think we're going to see the growth in that area pretty rapidly in the next few years.
Well, folks, I'll tell you, as we get ready to bid Jeff adieu, my visit to Hendrickson about a month ago, if you're thinking this is just a company that's building chassis, you'd be very surprised. There's a lot going on, really technologically advanced company with an eye on the future. It was an eye-opening tour. You guys are really on the cutting edge in a lot of ways, which is why I wanted to talk to you about this today.
I appreciate that, Jack.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Again, I'm Jack Roberts. This is Jeff Moris with Hendrickson. Thank you for tuning in for another edition of HDT Talks Trucking.